Hi guys, I'm Josh Perkins and this is Blacksmith Story, and today I'm with my friend Gerald Franklin. Gerald, I appreciate you spending some days with me. It's been a lot of fun.
You're welcome. It was fun. It has been fun, yeah.
You want to tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Gerald Franklin. I'm a blacksmith from Norman, Oklahoma. I moved up here off of a ranch in southern Oklahoma about 8 years ago. I had a shop down there on the ranch, just about the size of this. This is a 30 by 40 foot building. And basically just got old and needed to move to town. So we sold the ranch, and wife and I, Frankie, she's the brains of the outfit, and we moved up here. We're about 6 miles, 10, 12 minutes away from the OU campus. I do a lot of stuff out there, go to classes and things like that. We're closer to hospitals and things that old folks need to do, because where we live down near Duncan, down in the south part of the state, we live pretty far out in the country. Didn't get Monday night football till Wednesday night, and it was just time to move to town, so to speak. I've been smithing for probably about 20 years. I do work for the public. I don't advertise. I don't have a website. Most of my work comes through word of mouth, and I'm working on a couple of projects right now, and hopefully I'll be able to get those put to bed so I can start something fun. And we really welcome the opportunity to go on this, be part of your channel. I think that that's a good idea.
I appreciate it.
And I'm glad to be able to contribute.
So, how did you get into blacksmithing?
Well, I retired out of the Army several years ago. I spent almost 23 years in the Army, and I worked in the software business for a few years, and finally just burned completely out of airports and airplanes and that sort of stuff. So I didn't retire again, because I had retired once and I was about to kill myself. So I just quit and went into ranching. We raised registered Angus cattle down on a place down in the southern part of the state that I mentioned. And we, one day, for some reason or other, and I still to this day don't know why, I Googled blacksmithing just to see if something would come up. And of course something did come up. The screen lit up, and I started reading things and looking at websites and stuff, and didn't understand much about it. Of course, I was a rancher now, and I had welders and torches and things like that to keep stuff running down on the place. But I had never done any kind of smithing before. Didn't know anything about it. So I bought a book. That's kind of my go-to operation. I'm kind of a book freak, and I bought a book from Amazon, and I read it, probably understood half of it, stuff like chisel and anvil and things like that. And I was in the process of reading that book the second time through, and I heard an ad on the radio. The Museum of the Great Plains in Lawton was offering a one-day blacksmithing workshop for $100. Guy was coming in from the Amarillo area, and he was going to teach this class. It turned out that there were 3 of us in the class. I have no idea if the other 2 guys are still in smithing or not. But my idea was I would go over to Lawton, which is about 50 miles away, spend a day, and I would either get bitten by the bug or I wouldn't, and then I could come back home and give my book away or see if I wanted to do more of it. Well, it turned out that there were some people there from Salt Fork Craftsmen, which is our Oklahoma State Smithing Association, which I had no idea at the time that there was anything related to a state smithing organization or anything else. And they had left some literature there, some newsletters and so forth with membership applications and things. So I joined Salt Fork and started going to meetings, started acquiring some equipment, and started hosting meetings, started doing demonstrations, and it just spiraled up from there. I started going to classes and schools with some pretty well-versed blacksmiths nationally and internationally. But I really think the most help that I got was at the Salt Fork meetings, because they are informal enough to where somebody can come up and ask a question and get an answer and even get a demonstration without making somebody feel like the dummy that they may feel like they are in the beginning. So that's how I got started. And rest is, what does it say? Rest is history.
So who did you learn from as your?
Well, there's a pretty good list aside from our local state people who are some are not even in blacksmithing anymore. Some have passed on. Some have moved away. But noted names. The first formal class that I took was from Bob Patrick, which was a scroll and joinery class, and he really taught me a lot about the basics of stuff, to things that you really don't get out of books, just things like how to line up a chisel to make sure that you're cutting a straight line, to get the light right on the piece and so forth, that we don't even think about anymore. But when he's standing there at your shoulder, things seem to stick a little bit better. Tal Harris from North Carolina, I took a course with him up in Carbondale, Colorado, in Francis Whitaker's old workshop. Clay Spencer, I've learned a ton of stuff from him about making tools, tools for the anvil, tools for the treadle hammer, tools for the power hammer. He's a wealth of information. I've learned from Daryl Nelson, the Animal Heads guru. We got to be friends, and probably the most help to me has been Mark Ashbury. And I say that because I've worked with him for quite a while on his series of books, doing some of the proofreading / editorial work and that sort of stuff, and that helps me to get into his head a little bit deeper than what I would be able to get in a classroom or a shop full of people, so forth. So that's as long as there's somebody around that has something to say, I'll listen to them. I may not be smart enough to understand what it is that they're trying to tell me, or I may not agree with the way that they do things, but even if I don't agree with it, I can usually use that, whatever it is, process or whatever, to come up with my own way of doing things and so forth. So the community has been good to me.
Yeah. Is this a full-time venture for you or hobby?
No, I'm retired. No, it's not a full-time thing. I have started in the archaeology world a few years ago. Another interest, another hobby. The professionals, the professors and the professional archaeologists call me an avocational archaeologist. And that was another benefit from moving up here close to the university, because I've made a lot of friends out there, and I'm able to go out and take classes and so forth with the archaeologists, go out on digs, come back to the come back to the labs and do the lab work and so forth. And I've really gotten into that. So I try to split my time equally between blacksmithing and the archaeology work. So when I hang out with blacksmiths, I claim to be an archaeologist, and when I hang out with archaeologists, I claim to be a blacksmith, and that way I don't get any hard questions or anything. But no, it's not a full-time thing, and as I said earlier, I don't have a website. I don't do as much demonstrating as I used to, but I still occasionally demonstrate, and I'll pick up a job sometime from the demo, from people that come to the demo at say the county fair or somewhere like that. And the rest of the time, or other jobs that I get, just basically come through word of mouth. I'm in a position, by not being full-time, that I don't have to take every job that comes in the door just to keep the electricity turned on. So I can turn stuff down. Sometimes something comes in, and just to be fair to the client, I'll tell them, look, this is not really a blacksmithing job. You can save yourself a lot of time and money if you just go to such and such welding shop. They can do the work for you a lot quicker and cheaper than I can, because it's not a real blacksmithing job. It's more of a welding kind of a thing. I've got welders here in the shop that I use for my own stuff, but I don't weld for the public. So if I don't want to unlock the shop, I don't. It's the way it goes.
Have you developed a specialty over the years?
I think, personally, I enjoy the historical type of smithing more than the contemporary stuff. I don't do any, I won't say I don't Architectural smithing is not my bag. Knives are not my bag. Not that there's anything wrong with either one of them, but with architectural smith work, there's usually some kind of installation involved that requires you to be bonded and insured, and plus it's a lot of work. And I'm retired, so I don't want to work now. I will do gates and things like that for people, but so I'm not an architectural archaeologist. I've made knives, but I don't consider myself a knife maker, not a bladesmith. So I guess my real pleasure comes from historical stuff. I've got some reproductions that I've done for 4 different museums here in the state. The History Center in downtown Oklahoma City, the Firemen's Museum in Oklahoma City, the Firefighters Museum, I think it's called, Fort Towson, which is a historical Oklahoma History Center facility down in the southeast corner of the state, and at Fort Sill. I've done a lot of work for the old historical buildings at Fort Sill. The old jailhouse where Geronimo lived for a while and things like that. And I enjoy that historical type stuff. I enjoy doing stuff for chuck wagon cooks. They have some of them who are really into that have a real need and a desire for things that were done so-called the old way. In fact, some of them at these events that they go to, their stuff is checked out for things like arc weld beads and things like that, and they don't get kicked out of the competition. They just can't use that particular item while they're in the competition. But I enjoy working with chuck wagon people because they do put a lot of time and effort, and in some cases money, into their rig, and they want to do it right, and they're not satisfied with nickel-plated Phillips head screws to hold a set of hinges on that are also nickel-plated or whatever. So I enjoy helping them out with that. So I guess I'm a historical blacksmith at heart.
Nice. Do you prefer coal or propane?
I use both. It depends on the job. I have a couple of propane forges here in the shop. I've got one coal forge here inside the shop, and I've also got a portable coal forge that I take to demos and so forth. Of course, when I do a demo, I always use coal because that's part of the demonstration. But here in the shop, it depends on what I'm doing. If I'm forge welding, I will always use coal. I don't forge weld in my gas forges because the flux degrades the liner pretty bad, regardless of what kind of flux you use. If it's a borax-based flux, it's going to degrade your liner. So I don't forge weld in a gas forge. Besides, 5 feet away, there's a coal forge, and that's how I learned to forge weld, was in a coal forge, and it still works, and I can still find coal. So there's really no preference. It depends.
Yeah. So what organizations are you a member of?
Well, of course, our Oklahoma State Association, Salt Fork Craftsman. I'm also a member of ABANA, the Artist Blacksmith Association of North America. I don't know how long I've been an ABANA member, several years anyway. I've been a Salt Fork member for about 20 years. I'm also a member of the North Texas Blacksmith. In fact, I need to pay my dues, I think. I think I'm close to being in arrears with my dues, but I'll square that away. They're a good outfit, and they usually have some good meetings in different places. They do some demonstrations. Distance is kind of a problem with the North Texas bunch for me. I don't, about everything's at least a 3-hour drive and so forth. So I used to be a member of the Balcones Forge down in Central Texas. That's a good outfit too, but my main membership interest is in Salt Fork, the Oklahoma group.
Who or what inspires your work?
Well, there again, Bob Patrick, Mark Asprey, Clay Spencer from Tools. Clay has taught me so much about tools that I found several years ago that I could take what knowledge I had from Clay and use that to design tools for a particular job that I need. I've got stuff here in the shop that I can't really tell you when or why I built it, but and I'm still using it, but I may not be using it for the original intent. But Mark, and I still do book work for Mark Asprey. He does awfully good work, and I aspire to do the quality of work that he does. I'm not sure I'm going to live long enough to catch up with him. I like the work of Peter Ross. There again, I'll never probably be the smith that Peter Ross is, but he does awfully nice colonial era work, and I'll look at the stuff that he's done for tips and ideas and so forth. Jerry Darnell out of North Carolina is from a colonial era smithing perspective. He does awfully nice work, and he has his books. He's got, I think, 3 books now that are good references for me when I need to come up with a old-timey looking candle holder or something like that. So a lot of guys. Somebody told me one time there's nothing new under the sun. I believe that. The blacksmithing community is such a giving bunch of people that I guess there's no such thing as plagiarism in the blacksmithing world. Somebody's done it all before anyway. So I don't mind adopting somebody else's style or design or whatever, and I'm always willing to give them credit if we can come up with who actually did this and so forth. I mean, you know, I can't give them any money, but I can certainly give them credit for showing me how to do thus and such project.
Now, what events do you attend?
I go to Salt Fork meetings, and occasionally I go down to North Texas meetings. The North Texas conference every year is usually pretty good. I don't go every year from a distance standpoint, and most of them are around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and that's not my favorite thing, to drive around the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Salt Fork meetings have really fallen off. COVID hurt us bad. And consequently, I slacked off on going to Salt Fork meetings, partly because of COVID, partly because there just weren't many meetings to go to. But we got to fix that, I think. I mean, we've got to generate some interest in some other people hosting meetings and so forth to kind of get interest back up. I know that our membership has fallen since then. I go to Urbana conferences, go to Salt Fork conferences, Salt Fork picnics, even though I missed the Salt Fork picnic this year. But our Salt Fork conference is generally every year in October. And I think in the last 20 years, I've probably missed one of those. And that was because I had committed to doing a reenactment demo at the Honey Springs battlefield here in Oklahoma. And I thought I had planned around the conference, but it turned out that the board had to move the conference date. I had already committed to this other thing, and I didn't want to back out on them. So that's the only year, I think, in the last 20 years or so that I've missed the Salt Fork conference. But Salt Fork, Urbana, few North Texas things. Occasionally, I will go to a Ren Fair and just do a walkthrough, just to kind of see what there's interest in and what's selling and so forth. But I don't go and set up at Ren Fairs. And generally, when the Cleveland County or local county fair needs us, I and some other Smiths will go out and set up to demonstrate there. But mainly it's meetings. That's where the action is at meetings. And conferences are nice. You see people, you see things to buy, you see good demonstrations, but really where the action is at local meetings.
Do you offer any classes?
Currently, I have a couple of students or proteges that are working with me on an informal basis. In the past, I have taught classes for Salt Fork, the basic blacksmithing class that we teach in several different locations in the state. Is kind of patterned after one that I and others put together several years ago. I It's been a while since I've hosted a basic blacksmithing class at my shop, other than to one or two people at a time on an informal basis. I also designed and taught several times a basic joinery course for Salt Fork. It's probably about time to do another one of those. Also a basic scrolls class. I put one of those together. Probably about time to do another one of those in case people are interested in scrolls. Decorative punch class. I have taught that in the past. And a spin-off from that would be touch marks. If somebody wanted to use the time to make a touch mark instead of a set of eye punches or nostril punches for horses or whatever. There again, it's about time for some of those. So I think I need to get my act together and start offering more now that COVID's over. Well, I don't know if it's over or not, but people are a little bit more less jumpy about going to places and so forth. So I'll give myself a do better talk and see if I can't generate some more classes for, usually when I do a class, if I charge anything, it pretty much all goes to Salt Fork unless there's a lot of material involved, and I'll take some material money out of that. But in the past, I've done it as a fundraiser for the club.
How can people find your work?
Well, you can go to the Oklahoma History Center and look for the steamboat exhibit. There's some stuff that I did there. There's also some in the museum, like I mentioned, at Fort Sill. As I said, I don't have a website, so I won't necessarily send you to somebody's house so you can see some fireplace work that I did for them, because they're private people and they don't need it. So really, you'd need to come here or go to somebody else's shop. Maybe there's some trade items that I did that they were foolish enough to keep and so forth. But I don't keep a large inventory. A lot of stuff that I make is one-off stuff, and it goes out the door. And if somebody comes by and says, "Hey, I'd like to have a wine rack like you made for Josh," then I'll try to remember what I did for Josh and check my notes. I keep pretty good notes, and see if I can come up with something that pretty well matches the operation. But again, everything is hand forged here, so there's going to be enough difference between wine rack A, wine rack B, wine rack C to if you put them side by side, you'd be able to tell the difference. But I don't make it a practice, generally speaking, to go into production mode where I make a lot of things at one time, aside from maybe stuff for demos that I want to put on my sale table. You know, you've seen one S hook, you've seen them all.
Yep. How do you go about pricing your work?
I have I developed a shop rate years ago that I would charge at that time $20 an hour. And it was strictly a time and materials operation. So if I basically did a job for somebody and it took me 4 hours and the material wasn't completely outlandish, it's something that I had to go and buy a lot of stuff special. I didn't really consider the material cost in it, just got all rolled into that $20 an hour. Lately, I felt like I needed to up that because price of propane's going up, price of steel is going up, and generally speaking, yeah, coal, everything's going up. So my current shop rate, and I don't mind sharing that with anybody, is $30 an hour. I'm not trying to undercut anybody, but that satisfies me. I work so slow that if somebody who has to charge $60 an hour to keep his electricity turned on, meet his bills and so forth for keeping the shop open, it usually levels out because those guys will work a lot faster. So we'll turn in a price about the same because I work a lot slower anyway. So I'm always cognizant of trying not to undercut a brother Smith somewhere who may actually need the money to keep his operation going. I know in the back of my mind, generally speaking, what a good hammer costs. Generally speaking, I don't make hammers for the public. Occasionally I'll make a specialty hammer or something like that, but I'm not trying to run Brent Bailey out of business, even if I could. But I don't, I'm not gonna sell a hammer for $25 that Brent would sell for $250. I was told a long time ago by a good friend who's since passed on now, when I first started in this stuff, he was a professional smith. He made a living doing architectural stuff, putting architectural work into high-end homes in a couple of different areas in Oklahoma, $3-4 million homes. And he told me, among other things, that you should be prepared to give something away instead of selling it too cheap. And I've taken that to heart, and I've done that a time or two. I got to working on a project for a librarian down in Lawton that was a little cello. Somebody called me, picked up my card at the fair and called me and said, "Hey, I've got your card. My boss plays the cello and I'd like for you to maybe forge a cello." And of course that caught me off guard. I said, "A cello?" So I had to go do some research, and I forged her a pretty nice, what I thought was a pretty nice little cello, about 4 inches tall. Made a little rack for it and that sort of stuff, and it turned out I had so much time involved, I didn't have guts enough to charge the going rate, so I just gave it to him, you know, based on the old friend's caution that, you know, you just need to be prepared to give it away rather than sell it too cheap. And I like that idea. And That's not the only thing I've given away. Sometimes I do. But when I price something and it goes on the table, I don't come off of that. If it's at a demonstration and it's a $20 or $40 or $50 piece or whatever it is, I won't come off that. I'll haul it back home. And if I bid a job, I will usually give the client an about price based on what I think is going to be time and materials, and then I will give but it won't be more than a certain price. A lot of times I have to eat that, but I stay with that. I stick with that. I'm an old cowboy. I work on cowboy handshakes, and I don't go back on what we've said before. Occasionally somebody will work on an open-ended thing. Not usually, but they understand what it means to get involved in a job, and you wind up spending more time than you thought in that 15-minute period that you met with them to set the deal up, or 30-minute period or whatever. And occasionally somebody will say, yeah, that's a good price for me, but if you have to go over, just do what you have to do. And I appreciate that. I try not to take advantage of it, but it's nice to know that you've got that cushion back in your mind. Speaking of that, and this isn't an original thought with me, I've heard other smiths who made a living at this say this, that they once they give a bid, they won't come off of that. The client agrees to it and so forth. But if it's one of those things where they come and they meet with you and you do a sit down and you agree on the project and what needs to be done, and you give them a price, and somebody says, well, that's too much, I don't go back and say, well, yeah, it's $400 may be too much. Okay, I'll do it for $300. I don't do that. I'll work with them and say, well, you know, if this is too much, maybe we can not do certain things, or do certain things that will involve a little less time, and that way saving me time saves you money. But once I make that bid, I stick with it, even though I may have that little not more than cushion type thing. It's all, you know, how do you want to be treated yourself, kind of a deal, and so forth. So I know that's wishy-washy, but this is kind of a wishy-washy business. It's not like,
I don't find that to be wishy-washy. I think giving your bid, sticking to your bid, but then allowing the customer to decide which parts they're willing to concede on a project. That's not being wishy-washy.
Yeah.
You're giving the customer options.
That's right, yeah. And the option is not for me to cut rate my work,
Right.
but to do something a different way, maybe 3 scrolls instead of 18 scrolls, or whatever it might be, strictly in the vein of you're not paying for as much work as you would have done the other way.
I had a conversation with my son, who's in college right now. He's trying to get internships and about to head into the professional world. and we were talking salary negotiations and how important it is to negotiate your salary correctly. And the first thing I asked him was, well, how much do you want for your job? And he said, well, $40 an hour. And well, but maybe 30, 35.
Yeah.
And he stated his number, and then he backpedaled,
Yeah.
backpedaled. And I said, well, what you just told me is you'll take a job for $20 an hour.
Sure. Yeah. Why would I pay you 40 if I
Right.
can get you to work for 20?
You backpedaled twice on your original
Yeah.
price. And
Yeah.
I think that applies to blacksmithing as well. You know, if you state your price and then backpedal, the customer is always going to try and drop it even more.
Back in the days when I worked for a living in the software business, I worked for 2 or 3 different companies, and when I would go to talk about me coming to work for them as a software engineer or whatever it was, occasionally somebody would ask me, well, how much would you need to come to work for us? I'd always say, no, I'm not going to say a number. If I say a number, I can't go down, it can't go up. If you say a number, you can't go down.
Yeah, I told him the
I'd
same
always
thing.
make them say the number first, and then we negotiate from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's. But you want to treat people right, but still, again, you want to be compensated for your work. Part of the price that I tell people this sometimes. Part of that price that I'm quoting you is materials, which in a lot of cases, it's the material cost just doesn't even show up in the cost of the work. But and part of the cost to you is my time, and part of the cost to you is me knowing how to do what it is that you want done, because I've got time invested in that I may or may not have been paid for yet.
Right.
But when you go to a veterinarian to have your poodle mechanic work done, part of that visit fee is you're paying for him or her to know how to work on a poodle, right. Not physically what they've done in the clinic. So I occasionally I'll put that to somebody, that I'm not doing this job. It's fun. I enjoy it. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't enjoy it, because I don't have to. But I also expect to be compensated for not just this work today or tomorrow or next week, but for work that I've done along the way to learn how to do this stuff. Right. Schools that I've gone to.
Conferences you've attended.
Sure, yeah. Because knowledge doesn't come for free.
What advice do you have for beginners?
Wow. First thing I would tell a beginner is forget that you've got a checkbook or a credit card. Don't start out trying to buy a bunch of stuff that you see Josh with or Gerald with or whatever, because it may turn out that you don't need that as you learn how to smith. Your brain is your most important and most usable and most malleable blacksmith tool, most adjustable blacksmith tool that you'll ever have. So you need to be prepared to spend some money on developing the brain, either by, as you said, going to conferences, maybe taking a course with somebody at the John C. Campbell Folk School, coming to a Salt Fork workshop, something like that. Buy books, good books. Some of them are kind of pricey, but you'll have them. You can go back. You can make notes in the margins. I've got books that I've had for 20 years that, you know, I don't even know what I paid for, but I wouldn't take 3 times that, because they're worth more now after I get through scribbling in the margins or redrawing stuff and so forth. So concentrate on spending your money on developing this tool. The other tools will come. You need something to hit with. Doesn't have to be a $150, $200 hammer. You can go to some big box store and buy a 2-pound sledge for 15 bucks. That'll work.
2.5-pound ball peen.
You see a lot of British smiths still today on YouTube and so forth that are using a 1.5 or 2-pound ball peen hammer, and they're getting work done. You need something to hit your material with. You need something to hit it on. Doesn't have to be a big anvil that looks like this. It can be a chunk of railroad iron or something like that. And you need something to get it hot. You don't need a $2,000 gas forge to get going. You can build gas forges. There are plans around for building a particular, I won't say cheapo gas forge. It works. I've got one over there that was shop built, and the orifice in it is a MIG tip that you can, you know, when you need more, you need another tip in there, you just go to the welding supply store and buy a new MIG tip. You know, they're around. But I would also encourage new smiths to get into demonstration as soon as you can. And I know that people are a little bit reticent from standing up in front of a bunch of people to do their smith work because they don't feel like they're ready yet. But the reason I encourage that is to give you a reason to practice. If I show you how to make an S-hook, which I will at the very first thing that you make in one of my basic classes is going to be an S-hook, and then I will say, now go make 50 of them and we'll talk about something else. But I can't do that when I'm teaching a class, so but I do tell them that. Well, to this date, and I don't know how many new smiths I've taught, I've never had anybody show up with 51 S-hooks to show me that they've done this. Yeah?
I've got a bucket.
Yeah. And I may very well have made over the years, I don't know how many dozens of those that I've made, because when I go and do a demo at a school or somewhere like that, that's what I do. I'll do something simple that can be done in this, usually they'll run school kids by you in a 10, 15 minute round robin thing, and you don't have time to get into a gate or anything. You want them to see you finish something. And it occurred to me a long time ago that, hey, that's free practice time. I will probably not go to the shop and just practice making S-hooks. But all of the time that I'm sitting there, I need to do some sort of a mindless task for these onlookers that I don't have to spend a lot of time dithering around with, thinking about the mechanics of what I'm going to do next. And I can still talk along and tell them what I'm doing without really thinking about it. But at the same time, I'm grooving my swing almost free practice time. If you can go to a place and demonstrate, let's say the local county fair, you're feeling not too great about standing up in front of a bunch of people. They may think you're doing things wrong. They're not. They don't know what you're doing to start with. If you can put a piece of steel in the fire and get it to an orange heat and get it to your anvil and start hitting on it, you've got the people hooked. Some people will stay there and start asking you questions. And I don't know is a perfectly good answer. Or, gosh, I never thought about that. Let me think about it a little bit. You're not Superman. You don't have to be Superman. You just need to be able to entertain the public, possibly pick up a new member for your local organization, possibly make a new friend who wants to come to your place and learn more. If somebody doesn't like what you're doing, they're not going to stop anyway. They'll come by and maybe look and never pause. That's okay. You can't police the world. You can't sell this to everybody. There'll be other people who will come and watch you for, I've had people watch all day long. Go and get something to eat and come back and watch and just listen to you interact with other people, occasionally ask a question, but they're particularly interested in your answers to other people's questions and so forth. So I can't overemphasize the value to learning to become a better smith than doing public demonstrations for people. Also, I encourage you to go to your local meetings. If they have a trade item program, let me talk about that. I guess I should. Here at Salt Fork, we have what we call a trade item program. Some of Josh's earlier interviews have included that. Whoever the host of the meeting is will announce what the trade item is, and the idea is that you're going to make something and bring it to the meeting, or make it at the meeting, and you're going to trade your piece for somebody else's piece. That's why it's called a trade item. It usually will be something that's simple enough for somebody to really get into without feeling bad about entering. They don't want to, they feel like, well, I can't make a real good colonial candle holder with 3 candles and a spring and all of that kind of stuff. So you would maybe keep it simple to something like, for instance, a steak tournament. I didn't make this. Josh made this. It's one of his trade items that's going to a meeting later, but that is a simple enough thing. Josh made his a little more complicated because he wanted to do that, but somebody with just a few hours experience could do a trade item that would be worthy enough to go into, and worthy's not a good word, right. but that you shouldn't feel bad about putting something in onto the trade item table. Anyway, we bring these in, we make them there, we lay them out on the table. I always put my name on mine, either with a card or touch mark or both, so that if somebody has a question, they can come to me and ask me, how did you do thus and such? So, and I do the same thing. I want to see somebody's name on that piece because I have questions too. I've been doing this stuff for 20 years and I have questions every day that I want to ask other people. And if I don't know who made the piece, then I don't know who to go to ask questions. So when I host a meeting, I will say, okay, the trade item is going to be a stake turner or a letter opener or something that's simple enough so that a recent new smith would not feel poorly about entering his work, because we're interested in everybody's work, or I am anyway. And I don't just want to see I don't want to just see the Cadillac stuff. I want to see all the old GMC pickup stuff and everything too on the table.
I mean, it's an opportunity to see all the different artistic styles and present your best work at the time, which is, it's different for everybody. And everybody's going to do something different.
Absolutely. You'll never know. You say, well, occasionally somebody will come up with a trade item that you may have to go and research. One of our meetings several years ago, the trade item was a rug beater. Well, I'm an old dude and I remember people having things like rug beaters, but a lot of the younger people had to go and, first thing, somebody even called me and asked me, hey, Gerald, what the heck is a rug beater?
Trammel hook for me.
Yeah, trammel hook,
is that?
something like that. But if you keep it simple enough, then you can, if you feel creative enough to turn a simple item like a meat flipper or steak turner or whatever into a masterpiece, then get after it. If you just want to hammer some steel and learn to taper and learn to twist and learn to do this and such kind of handle, you shouldn't feel poorly about bringing that in to put on the trade item table. It is very, very, very poor manners and reflects on your parents to go to a meeting and comment negatively about somebody's trade item.
Yeah.
I've heard people do that. I've cut them off. To say, well, I really wanted to get something good, but this is what I wound up with. There's absolutely no room for that. We're all learning. We're still learning after 20 years. There's just not room for that. I did have a couple that they're still Salt Fork members who came to my shop to spend a day or two to learn. It turned out that she was a better smith than he was, but that happens too. Mainly because she was a better listener. And but anyway, they in talking to these folks, I'd known them for quite a while, and I was kind of pleased that they wanted to take the time to come down and spend some time, and hopefully I could make them better. Hopefully I didn't make them dumber, but somewhere during the day she mentioned, the wife mentioned, who was doing very well, by the way. She said, my goal with my smithing work is to make something good enough to put on a trade item table. So we stopped and we had a come to Jesus meeting about, you don't have to feel poorly. Right. You don't have to feel bad about not thinking that your stuff is not good enough. It's as good as you can do. If it's not as good as you can do, then probably you don't want to put it on the table. You don't want to. Right. You don't want to half-ass something just to get finished with something to put on the table, because that's a reflection to other people about your work. Mm-hmm. But just because it may look unfinished to to me, and we would know, everybody who looks at the table assumes that this is the best that you can do at this time. 6 months from now, you'll go back and you'll come to my shop and you'll see your steak turner or something like that hanging on the wall, and you may say, gosh, why did you hang that up? And I can do so much better now. I also tell students, young students, or new students, not necessarily young, don't throw anything away that you make. It's worth a lot to you to be able to take this first pair of tongs that you tried to make and keep it. You can keep it out of sight if you want to. If you don't want somebody coming by and seeing that hanging on the wall, that's up to you. But don't throw it in the scrap pile, because 18 months from now, your ability to make tongs, for instance, or candle holders or steak turners or whatever, is going to get better if you'll practice. And that's worth something to you to go back as a reference to see.
Yeah.
So,
and not just that, but other people. You know, when I'm teaching somebody how to do something and they get frustrated, this is horrible. I'm like, oh, well, let me show you my first attempt.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you did actually better than I did. So.
Yeah, you're on the road right now. That's cool. So again, I would suggest to a new smith, don't hold out going to farm auctions and flea markets and stuff for that pristine looking Peter Wright anvil before you start smithing in earnest. I tell people, you can go to places like Harbor Freight or Steel or Steve's Wholesale or somewhere like that, buy what some people may consider a trot line anchor. You know,
they've actually gotten better. They've got that cast steel.
Yes, they do. The Doyle, I think.
Yeah.
The first anvil that I bought was from Harbor Freight. They don't handle them anymore, but it was their so-called Russian anvil. And I used that thing for years. Some people, some of my buddies, kind of curl their lip up when they'd come to my place and see it. And I would tell them, look, I'm working. I've got something to work on. You're still looking for that Peter Wright or that mouse hole or that fancy dancy hay button anvil and all that stuff, and you don't have anything to work on. I've got something now, and I'm learning. So there again, a piece of railroad iron. I don't necessarily recommend that, except for it does give you an idea about what you can use. If your local scrapyard will still let you go in and pick over stuff. Some scrapyards don't do that anymore, but you know, if you can find yourself a big chunk of something like that. That's an upsetting block. Now, I don't know what that is. It's been machined. It's got some kind of jaws on it or something like that. I don't even know where I got it. I would imagine at some scrapyard somewhere, but that'll work. You think about an anvil like this, it's about 17, 18 inches long. How much of that surface do I use at any one time? I don't use anywhere near all of that surface. So if I've got something like this that I could use to hit against, and I've got something to hit with, and I've got something to get it hot, then I'm a blacksmith.
Go time.
Yes, absolutely.
And you can even use mild steel if you're.
Oh yes.
That'll teach you a lot about temperature control, and if you do damage it, you can take a grinder to it and clean it up.
Absolutely. So it's not about who dies with the most toys. We do turn ourselves into what Josh and I call tool dorks. You've seen around this shop here that there are tools hanging up, and I look at things like fly presses and power hammers and treadle hammers, not so much as something to hit something with, but as an excuse to make another tool to use. So I would suggest that you kind of ear the checkbook back, watch, listen, learn. Somebody maybe even come up and give you an anvil. That's happened before too. You know, somebody says, hey, you know, my uncle was a blacksmith and this old anvil's been in the barn for years, and I didn't want to sell it to anybody, but I'd like for a real blacksmith to have this anvil. Never happened to me, but
Never happened to me.
It has happened.
Heard the stories.
It has happened to people, but don't be in a rush. Chances are, if you buy something like this at a flea market, you're going to be trying to compete against the flea market jockeys that are going to buy this anvil for X dollars and take it to the next flea market down the road and sell it for X plus $100. So they're running the price up on you. It'll never be used in that vein. It'll probably wind up in somebody's flower bed as an ornament or something like that. If you're not a welder already, it would help you to learn to weld, stick weld, arc weld, something either MIG or stick welding, something like that. It'll help you to make things like fire pots for your coal forge or mounting a blower to your coal forge. People start with hair dryers, using hair dryers for blowers, vacuum cleaner, motors for blowers on forges. You don't have to go into the antique business to become a blacksmith.
Right.
Just take it easy, but practice. It's neat to come to me and say, okay, what are you going to teach me next? Well, that's okay, but a lot of times I resist that because you haven't made that 50th S hook, or you're still struggling with basic leaves and things like that. So why would I need, what favor am I doing you to teach you to make a colonial candle holder when you haven't even developed the hammer control to make a decent leaf, or what you consider a decent leaf? It's just practice. And practice is free for the most part.
What would you like to see in the future of blacksmithing?
Wow. I really think that the day's gonna come when we can't buy coal. I don't know if I'll see that day. It's already getting harder and harder to find decent coal. There are mines here in Oklahoma that are sitting idle. There's a website that you can go to. There's apparently an Oklahoma Mining Commission, and it's a dollar and cents thing with those folks. When they can afford to buy diesel for the front end loaders and the strippers and that sort of stuff, and make a decent salary from mining coal, they'll do it. When it can't be cost effective anymore, they'll shut the mine down.
I called every number in the state last year and couldn't get a single person.
That's right. That's right. And it'll go and come, but blacksmiths cannot keep the coal miners in business. We just simply don't do the volume. So I think that the day is going to come when we can't get coal. I don't see it being an EPA thing. I see it being just a flat economic thing where the mines have to close down, because more and more power plants, steel plants have long since stopped burning coal and coke in the United States. The high production steel plants are electric fired for several reasons, but mainly they can make more money on electric fired steel plants. Power plants are leaving coal from one reason. From an EPA standpoint, they've got to put scrubbers in to keep emissions down and so forth, and I understand that, but it's also cheaper now to pipe in natural gas than it was to haul in train loads of coal and so forth in the past. So I think what's going to happen is there's plenty of coal around. There's coal in every state in the United States, all 50 states. It's just not economical to get to. I've got Smith and friends in the Pacific Northwest that they can't get coal, haven't been able to get coal. So they're strictly propane. As I say, I use both, but I think that the day's going to come when somebody is just going to throw up their hands and say, we can't find coal anymore. So if you're going to invest in a forge to learn on, I would suggest a propane forge. Doesn't have to be a big fancy one. I would suggest that for two reasons. Number one, you're almost always going to be able to find propane for the near future, near and far future. I think. I don't have any data to back that up, but that's just what I believe. Number two, it's one less tool that a beginning smith has to learn. The coal fires don't run themselves. You have to learn to use a coal fire, just like you have to learn to use a hammer and a hot cut chisel or something like that. And you don't really have that learning curve with a propane forge. So I think that's one thing to look for in the future. I foresee that with Abana and other Abana affiliates and state associations and local associations and so forth, I think that there's going to be more and more smiths starting the business. I'm not a knife guy, but I watch Forged in Fire every week when it comes on. Sometimes I see a friend on there, and sometimes I kind of snicker at people too, but we've had a lot of new members come to Salt Fork based on the fact that they got interested with Forged in Fire, which from that standpoint alone, you don't have to be a bladesmith, you don't have to make $3,500 swords and all of that kind of stuff, but it does create some interest to make them do like I did and go to Google and Google blacksmith and to see just what's out there. So I see that there's still going to be the interest, not necessarily in the professional smiths. That's an entirely different operation. you got to make a living not just for you, but for your hands in the shop. Those types of things have become more like fab shops, unless you're in an area that can support that kind of ironwork and people are willing to pay for it. But if you're not in an area that's building $8-10 million homes and are willing to put in an order for $200,000 worth of ironwork for pool railings and so forth like that, the chances of you starting today and with the eye towards making a living at this is probably slim. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but you're going to have to eat a lot of dirt along the way to get into the category where you would create a base of clientele and so forth to turn you into a professional smith. I've heard Bob Bergman say, I quote him a lot. Bob Bergman used to say, you don't have to every piece you make doesn't have to be a masterpiece, but you have to know how to make a masterpiece to be a decent smith. He would also say that if you're going to be a professional smith, and he was one until he retired a few years ago, he used to say, if you are in the habit of expecting a steady paycheck to come in, then professional blacksmithing is not for you. He said, I've got a couple of ex-wives who were like that. They expected a steady paycheck to come in, and now they're ex-wives. And everybody laughs, and so forth. But, it's feast or famine, and it's hard work. If you're going to put in that number of hours in the shop, when you don't have a job that's commissioned and you are using shop time to make a bunch of tools to go and sell to other blacksmiths and things like that, you'll sleep well at night. It's tough work, even if you're using stuff like power hammers and so forth. Mm-hmm. So I see the non-professional end of things going up. Abana makes a very concerted effort to try to support the non-professional smithing world. Some of the Abana membership don't like that. They think that that everybody should be a pro like they are and so forth. Well, that's not the case. Yeah. And I don't think ever will be the case.
I don't think so either. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to have me out to your place.
I enjoyed it. We had fun. Yeah. We're still having fun.
Still having fun. I'm going to shoot another video after this. So.
Yeah, we'll do a demo